Well, welcome to this session. This is a session presented as part of the GAMIFY project, which is an Erasmus Plus project co-funded by the European Union. And in this project, we advance games and gamification as methods to enhance innovation and entrepreneurship. And this is also the launch of the GAMIFY Continuous Professional Development course, which we developed within the consortium as part of the project. And it is based on working with the design patterns collection that we have also produced as an outcome from the project. You can see our industrial partners on the bottom with the icon, with their logos. And also we have academic partners from Germany. This is the HHL Leipzig University, from Spain, the Competency University in Madrid, and Denmark, Design School Coding, and our university from Berlin, Germany, of Applied Sciences for Media Communication and Management. So my name is Kirill Ivanov, and Henning Breuer will facilitate this session today. And in it, we will try to present how gamification can be used to effectively manage and teach innovation. So how can this be done? We have identified three different approaches for that and have linked them to three distinct maturity levels. So on the first level, developers or learners can use existing games to address simple predefined challenges. Like, for example, they can be asked to search, select, and moderate a simple game to facilitate a workshop through different warm-up or debriefing activities, which are often gamified, and they address typical challenges in workshops such as communication challenges or collaboration challenges. And there are many different games that exist for this purpose. On the next step, different games can be adapted or customized for an individual project or a particular innovation challenge. And in that case, learners can discuss the limits of repurposing an existing game. Like, for example, in design thinking, this is a gamified activity which is used, where participants are asked to draw a vase in the first step. And in the next step, they are asked to consider this question from a different perspective and to draw a way to enjoy flowers in their homes. So by reframing the question, different drawings are presented. And just by this reframing of the question, this creates a new perspective on the challenge, a new way to approach the task at hand. So learners can discuss the limitations or the advantages of repurposing such kind of an approach to different domains, different kinds of innovation challenges. And the third way to teach gamification or to manage gamification for innovation is to develop a new game from scratch in order to address a unique innovation challenge, which often happens in companies. Many times the innovation challenges that companies are faced with do not have a particular gamified approach which has been developed before for that purpose. And here is where the work with the design patterns that we propose comes into play, literally saying. So before we present the GAMIFY design patterns themselves, we have actually thought how to facilitate working with them. And we have developed the GAMIFY blueprint process. And as part of this game development blueprint process, we have also developed this template, which is called the GAMIFY blueprint canvas. In this template, all the essential information needed for developing a new game from scratch is summarized by the participants. And I would like to welcome you to also share your ideas and guess or suggest what could be in this canvas. So what are these aspects which should be considered when designing a new game or a game-like format from scratch. What are these essential yes, factors or aspects that have to be taken into consideration? So anyone who has an idea, please turn on your mic and share that, or you can write it in the chat. We can try to...
Hello, Kirill.
Hello.
It might be interesting to include hybrid forms, so partially virtual, partially on campus.
Okay, so
because that's absolutely new, I think, and that's something we do not know yet. It's not that simple. And so far, to be honest, my experiences are not very positive with that. So let's see how we can improve. Camilo, there you are.
Yes, so in that sense, maybe the way that the game is presented can be considered. So should it be an offline format, an online format, or a hybrid? So the actual media, how this content is presented to the players or the participants. So we have this aspect here where we have to think about the game type and the media used to present the game, and also what kind of flow of interactions should take place in order to achieve the objectives of the game. So yes, here participants generate ideas about different media types or genres of game, like games like board game, card game, construction game, and there are different basic flows that can be applied for that. And for that purpose, we have the so-called interaction flow design patterns, which we'll talk later on. So this is the 5th box of the canvas. Any ideas for the other?
Yeah, Camilo just wrote in the chat here that we should consider the premise or the narrative intent of the game, then the mechanics, including rules and principles of play, and interactions, how players participate in an interdependent way.
Yes, I would say that the premise, the narrative intent of the game, we also consider that in the further steps, but also I would say that this is linked to another suggestion that just appeared in chat, the final goals. So this is basically the purpose. So what's the objective of this game? Why do we want to introduce it? And this is defined here. So what is the purpose or the intent of the game? Which aspects of the problem or challenge we intend to focus on? And this actually leads to revealing the first box. Before we start developing a game, we need a challenge. And this challenge should be also specified and understood in context and reframed. Like this also helps to bring everyone to the same page, inspire a solution-driven collaboration between the participants. So in our canvas, we reframe the challenge into a how might we question. Then the other ideas from Camilo.
Camilo was cheating a bit and wrote components. So actually that's the box number 6 here. You must have looked it up here someplace. And then we have Elisandra de Silva saying, what about the target public or mixed public, students, entrepreneurs, so who's playing the game, right? And who's engaging in that in the first place, right? So obviously we need to know that.
Yes, so this is the second box. I will have to get a headset. With one of the comments that my quality, audio quality is not so good. So I'll do that in a minute. But yes, so this is the second box where we have to identify all the stakeholders that can be somehow related to the outcomes of the game and influence its development, but also who are going to be the intended participants, who is the target group of the game. And we have just one box left. Playfulness, the fun or joy that sits at the heart of games. Yes, that's an important aspect.
Could I make a little comment? Just to share about this, I often use a metaphor of a swing like a playground swing. And I tend to ask people if they've ever used a swing. And did anybody here ever use a swing?
As a child,
why?
often.
Yeah, why?
For fun.
So the reason why I like that question when thinking about gamification is something very beautiful that gamification can achieve is that it gets someone on the swing where they're no longer questioning why they are playing, but they are pursuing the goal because they are enjoying themselves, which is what I was sort of going at with this playfulness.
Also, the state of flow, which is popularly presented as an essential part of game playing. Also inspiring some task that has to be achieved, and which is not too difficult but not too easy either. I think this is an important aspect. Okay, so we have some good ideas, sequence of activities, settings. So I would just review the fourth box here, which is actually the methodology. So how the game should work. And this is linked to the sequence of steps that was suggested in one of the comments, in one of the last comments. So how actually learning or change should take place through the course of actions, through these different. So this is linked actually to educational paradigms of imparting knowledge. So what is the way in which information or knowledge is provided to the participants, or in what way do they learn? What kind of approach is used for that? So these are the different aspects that we consider before going into the further development of the game. In this template, we sit down with all the participants, the client, in many cases, the company which intends to apply this game, and we consider these aspects in the beginning. And in boxes 5 and 6, we consider the design patterns that are required for developing the game. So I would hand on to Henning to present these design patterns.
Right. So part of the impact project was always to review what kind of design patterns, what kind of reusable solutions are already out there to design games that can facilitate innovation and entrepreneurship, that can support coding activities, or that can be used for educating students in these domains. And just a brief introduction on the design pattern approach. It was initiated by an architect named Christopher Alexander in the 1970s as an approach to document design knowledge, to make it reusable, but also to make it accessible to a wider audience, including the inhabitants of this kind of architecture, right? To make architectural knowledge more accessible to a wider audience. And what he defined was that each pattern describes a problem which occurs over and over again in our environment, and then describes the core of the solution to that problem in a way that you can use this solution 1,000,000 times over without doing the same thing twice. So we use this kind of design pattern approach that has been introduced in architecture, then it was adopted in fields like software design, interaction design. We're currently transferring that also to the field of sustainable business design, with a book coming out towards the end of the year. And here we're presenting this application to the design of gamified formats. So such a challenge could be from urban planning here. How do I design an area for nightlife? Well, a solution that has been pursued all over the world and seems to be relatively successful is that you gather together a couple of different offerings, provide a good lighting and invite people to join in the centers of the city, usually for these kind of nightlife spots, right? And that is a kind of solution that you can see in all the big cities all over the world, and that has been proven to successful to facilitate something like a nightlife. On the next slide, we can then see how we adapted that in order to document knowledge on gamification. So here we're looking for reusable gamification solutions or game designs that respond to challenges that we are facing in innovation and entrepreneurship. So we have a structure for these patterns consisting of a name, an innovation challenge, a solution statement, some notes, an example, and related patterns. And on the next slide, you can see the overview of all the 36 patterns that we gathered so far. On the top level, these 1 to 12, these are the reoccurring challenges in innovation and entrepreneurship that we extracted from the literature. So these include from a very top normative management level issues of values, management, cross-functional engagement, and so on, and then goes down to the level of really different stages in an innovation funnel, ideation, exploration, evaluation, all these overarching domains that we're talking about in innovation textbooks that probably all of you have studied at some point in time. On the second level, then we have particular innovation challenges that can be addressed through gamification. These we identified through collaboration with our industrial partners in the GAMIFY project. Maybe, Kirill, you can paste here the link to the GAMIFY project also into the chat for those interested in following up on that. And these are, challenges like cultural challenges, for instance, that can be and have been addressed by means of gamification, because there might be challenges like, I don't know, raise investment capital that cannot be sufficiently addressed through gamification by itself, right? On the next level, then we have these gamified flow patterns or gamified interaction flow patterns that describe reusable flows of interaction between participants and artifacts to address these innovation and entrepreneurial challenges. So these are things like dilemma games, different ideation formats that can be workshop formats, agile retrospectives, so things that are like self-contained formats and reoccurring flows that are used to facilitate and support innovation-related activities. And on the bottom level, these flow patterns then can be populated with component patterns, and these are reusable components that contribute to different flows of action, right? Things like provide an epic meaning, right? Tell a hero story and let the participants walk through a set of activities. Or mutual goals, define a mutual goals for the game participants. Competition, right? So like these different component elements that we again saw in the literature and in the games that we found through our quite comprehensive research on these topics. Then on the next slide, you can see an overview of these 36 patterns. So we are still developing these. And maybe, Kirill, you can make a preview available here also through the chat. So these are just the short descriptions of these 36 patterns. On the left-hand side, the flow patterns. On the right-hand side, the component patterns. And there's always like a short description. And we're about to also develop like a card set that you can easily use in your classes, a virtual and a physical card set. To teach gamification for innovation to students or in professional contexts, or that you can utilize to create your own games. And we also have a long description that backs up each pattern with a related literature, right? Where because obviously we didn't invent all of that stuff, but we are heavily drawing from numerous publications in that domain. And those of you interested in the topic know that gamification for innovation gamification as such, in particular for innovation, has been a topic of growing interest, not just in this community, but also in the literature. Okay, so that brings us to the next slide, where you can see an example. How does that work? For instance, we have a challenge. Actually, that was one challenge we were facing together with our industrial partners. We were saying, well, we're introducing new values into our corporate strategy here, actually values of sustainability, but how can we facilitate the adoption of these abstract organizational values among the employees? It's not enough that the CEO makes a great speech and says here, become more sustainable, please. But, and then we can look at the next levels. So they ask us to support them as well, providing some gamified formats in identifying opportunities for sustainability-oriented innovation in the organization. And we were looking at different options. Two options in terms of flow patterns could be dilemma-solving games and awareness-raising games. And these then can be enriched through different components, like these component patterns, role-playing, assigning different roles to different participants. For instance, you are the finance guy, you are the shareholder, you are the NGO, you are the critical journalist, and so on. These were some of the roles we were working with. They have to come up with a collective decision on these dilemmas. The dilemmas themselves serve as given challenges. There's branching choices depending on what choice you take. You're taken into a different direction and so on. Another alternative flow to address that would be awareness raising, where you can say, okay, we have an epic meaning here to pursue, and dedicated facilitators to leverage the whole process. And next slide, please. Just a very short example description here. These are the short descriptions of one of the dilemma of the flow patterns we want you to now work on, which is the dilemma solving. Challenge here is how can we turn abstract organizational values into actionable heuristics. Solution sensitize employees for potentially conflicting values and help them to understand these values by letting them deal with typical dilemmas encountered in their daily work. Then for each pattern comes with an example. I think that's not so essential here, and leads us directly to the next slide, or even more a mural board that we prepared, where you can see here on the left-hand side the different elements of this canvas, right? The different building blocks, the challenge, the stakeholders, the purpose, the methodology, the game type, and the components. Number 1 to 5 are already pre-filled, as we pre-filled them or filled them together with our industrial partner in this project. That then led us to choose the dilemma game option. And what we want you to participate in now is to generate some ideas based on these patterns below here, to populate these kinds of dilemma game flow with different components, and to interpret these components based on your experience and your knowledge, and then see if we can come up with a new flow, maybe, or a different flow than the one we came up with in this project. So Kirill, I think you are taking us here to the mural room. Yes, the letters are way too small, so we need the link to the mural room. I don't know who of you is familiar with mural yet. So it's an interactive, like a collaboration platform. Clicking on that link should bring you into a login page. You can just join as a visitor. You don't need to enter your name or anything. You could just enter as a visitor, and then you will see the mural view. So maybe, yeah, Kirill, you already know, you're not sharing you need to change. For those of you that are not familiar with mural, I think it would be great. Okay, now we can see and join Kirill's link here, looking into the different aspects of that canvas. Okay, Kirill, do you wanted to quickly guide us through the first 5 fields of this?
Yes, sure. I hope you can hear me better now.
Yeah, perfect.
So now, first, I would like to also share for those of you who haven't used Mural, just simply how you can add sticky notes here and how you can navigate in the board. So on the left side, there is this ribbon. If you see on the screen in Zoom that I'm sharing, and you can click here on the second option, and then choose a sticky note and drag it to the canvas and write down your ideas. Or you can right click and choose add sticky note to do that. If you have a mouse, that would be great with a scroll, because you can zoom in and zoom out using your scroll. And if not, you can just use this widget on the bottom right of the screen. So as Henning mentioned, this is a real challenge that we were dealing with in the GAMIFY project, where a large telecommunication company adopted a new strategy and normative orientation towards sustainable management and innovation. However, many organizational members resisted the required mindset shift. And for instance, some employees can be familiar with the importance of the environmental aspects of corporate sustainability, but lack awareness about other aspects, for example, protecting human rights and promoting digital inclusion. So we reframed this challenge as how might we establish, think ahead, and translate into everyday corporate practices the topic of corporate sustainability. Then we thought what could be the stakeholders or the participants in such kind of format. And these had to be about 12 participants in each session that could be done in the various sites of the telecommunication company. The purpose of the game would be to impart knowledge and raise awareness about corporate sustainability, also to allow participants to self-reflect on their own impact on corporate sustainability, and to also generate ideas for improvement. So based on that, we also thought that the methodology can be based or reflect these purposes. So it can be a moderated 2 to 4 hours one-time workshop event, which can be conducted in the various sites of the company, for example, offline. And it can go through these 3 stages. So first, raise awareness about corporate sustainability. Second, allow participants to reflect on their own impact of corporate sustainability, like an interpretation and reflection stage. And finally, the third stage would be ideation. So finding approaches for action based on lessons learned from the previous stages. So one way to do that, as Henning mentioned, is to use a dilemma flow. And you can see the description, a short description of the dilemma flow, and some related components, which are here on the bottoms, like cards, rows, and pitch. In the link that we shared with you in the chat with the different examples of design patterns, you can find elaborate descriptions of all of these 4 patterns. But I think what you need for this exercise is sufficient from what you can read on this mural board. And some ideas in the box number 5, how to use the dilemma solving pattern is to first distribute predefined dilemmas and ask players to work with them. Then players can evaluate other players' ideas, how they responded to the dilemma. And based on that, they can derive insights and generate ideas for improvement after each dilemma is addressed. So now we would ask you to use 7 minutes to, and I will start the clock, to write ideas in this 6th box in gray that build upon the component patterns below. So cards, rows, and pitch. One example for that is like presented in this pink sticky note. So using cards to allow players to choose a dilemma from a set of predefined dilemmas. Or you can read the other 3 patterns and yes, suggest ideas that elaborate upon them. So let's use 7 minutes for that.
If you have any questions on how that's supposed to work, just let us know. every contribution is welcome. It's just about coming up with different ideas, how cards could be used, how you could work with roles, how you can work with pitching, given such a dilemma flow.
And considering also the purposes that we mentioned, these 3 goals: raising awareness, reflecting on one's own impact, and generating ideas.
Okay, great. I see many people are already writing here something. So here on the right-hand side, we have a few hidden Easter eggs, so we can maybe also reveal those ideas that we kind of pre-filled in case you wouldn't come up with any, which is not the case, but we can just add them to the collection here. Okay, and so we see you're already providing a lot of ideas here. One is Joker cards to change the flow and animate reverse thinking or tinkering, no, thinking probably. One is players receive SDG goal cards and reflect how they can refer to their work. Yes, that's a very interesting, very relevant aspect, right? How to cross this enormous bridge between these abstract goals of sustainable development and everyday practices. Actually, that's one of the elements we also included in the game that we came up with here. So roles could be good cup, bad cup. Use cards to facilitate the adoption of roles to be used for reflecting outside one's own perspective. Introducing outside-in perspective by the means of cards. Yes, that could be one interpretation of the cards. So maybe we put all the stuff on the cards here onto the bottom, onto the top. People should be able to react upon each other. I guess that is associated to the roles and maybe to the pitching. Pitch ideas with a sign language. Wow, that's cool. Without words. Forced creativity here. An exercise that we also use in design thinking sometimes, right? Cards are sorted according to the values of the organization. Yes, that's a nice idea. Why didn't we use that one? Damn, we should have done this exercise with you before. Okay. Cards with QR codes relate to hidden content. Kirill, I think we have to redesign our game. Questions used to help to invoke trends contextually. How do they refer to the problem through other lenses? It's again the bringing in new perspectives by the means of these cards. Okay, any ideas on the pitching? Here come some pitching ideas. Use the Bono thinking heads, yes. As feedback roles, okay, yes. It's another idea on how to, what kind of roles to assign to the players, how to generate feedback, how to instruct that, pitch your ideas as worse as bad as possible. Yeah, that's a good one. Team members have to play devil's advocate and pitch. Oops, what's that? And pitch
why a measure
shouldn't be taken.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that fits good here to the bad cup, good cup, right? And the feedback aspects. Okay, I think we should probably get done with this part of the exercise, and then we should maybe one or two volunteers who try to pick up some of these ideas we collected here on the left-hand side and yeah, sketch them to a possible game flow. So what could you do first? What could you do second? What could you do third? The right-hand side, we also had one option created. Elsewise, what could be, which ones of these ideas we collected here? Whoops, time's already up. Is that possible?
That was from the last one because we're starting now the new activity.
Okay.
I'll start again the timer, but I guess already someone is quite far ahead in this. So yes, on this right-hand side, as Henning mentioned, please now, or it's better to do it just one or two volunteers. Or
I don't know, whoever has a sequence to bring in. So the idea is to start from the top and then go to the bottom. Oftentimes the pitch comes towards the end, but why not start with the worst pitch possible and end with a better one, or the other way around? Just select one or two from the post-its here in this component fields and map one or two potential flows here on the right-hand side. Okay, and the last step, we can have here cards with a QR code. Okay, something else to begin with. I mean, I know we said here one option could be the dilemma cards. Player chooses from a set of predefined dilemmas. What could be another starting point? Maybe one could be here just what you said here, relate the global goals to your own work experience, right? And reflect upon that. Someone painted a question mark here in the bottom line. Yes, that's the basic challenge. What can we put here?
My post-it disappeared. I write it again.
Okay, sorry for that. I don't know. Don't be deleting other people's post-its, please. You can see the timer here on the top left. So actually we have a bit more time than I initially thought and expected. Okay, Camilo, maybe you can, I see you're quite active there, and you said you would bring in the energy of 10 participants, so maybe you already have the majority of this session. Maybe you want to...
And
sketch
just,
out a little flow for us that we could take here through?
I've been sketching a little flow here of a potential activity, but I think I might have been too enthusiastic.
No, never.
I'm just going to write two presidents and then I'll explain. It's
Sure.
it's very simple.
Okay. Maybe while you're finishing up the last ideas here. Okay, so here I see there's a yellow flow here from top to bottom. Do you want to explain? I think that's already done. Do you want to briefly guide us through that? Not sure who contributed that one.
Yes.
Starting with players receive 3 random dilemmas.
Yeah. So basically, the main contribution, I think, is to introduce an element of randomness, because that's very common in games. And normally I like to deal with choice, but these are big, difficult questions. And if you're not necessarily connected with sustainability, as we assume people are here, maybe you just need to be handed something, but then you still choose from those. So you get a random set of the dilemmas and you choose some of them to work with. So you still have an element of choice. And then you reflect on that from your own perspective. Of course, you could here also distribute roles that you have to choose in the same manner, but I disregarded that for time. And then I thought you should share these in small groups. And then one from each of these groups should pitch a consolidation of what the group has talked about and ways to address the different dilemmas. And you could also construct the groups beforehand in some way as to facilitate that the groups have a different array of random dilemmas, depending on how many you have. So that briefly, thank you. You're muted.
Maybe now Camilo can present.
Yeah, so the element of randomness, then associating that to your own situation, your own experience, and then having a collaborative reflection upon that. Yeah, I think that's one very, very good approach, quite similar to the one we choose. Camilo, which approach are you suggesting?
So I think I got a little bit too excited. And I started with the idea that there might be a dilemma board, which might have some some sort of template cards that people can fill out with dilemmas related to sustainability that they've identified in the workplace. During the first week of a month, people are posting up dilemmas, and there's some jars underneath the board. So then during that week, after the dilemmas have been put up there, then people vote on which ones they want to focus on. Then in the next stage, I thought something that could be really interesting in terms of the playfulness is providing cards of the kinds of information that teams would need, that everyone would need to know about a dilemma. So the cards are used for, let's say, okay, what kind of statistics do we have about this? What kind of antecedents about this dilemma? So people can, so the whole team jointly characterizes the dilemma. So people put up dilemma, then they vote on them with jars, and then everybody jointly provides information about the dilemma. And then there's sort of a smaller team. The team breaks up into smaller groups to come up with potential solutions for it. It could be less than a week, maybe that's one day. And then at the end of the week, if we go down, people pitch their solutions to see which ones might be the most in line with the values of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was doodling.
Okay.
But
yes.
I think that the thing that I wanted to include, that I want to highlight here, because all the creation stuff is quite common, but the idea of making it like a quest game to fill out the cards of the information about the dilemma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So using
involved.
the cards also as blanks, right? Like the other way around, not just giving predefined cards out to the participants, but turning them into blank sheets, so to say, that can then be contributed to the game. Very cool. Yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's it.
Cool. Very nice. Okay, someone else is doing something here on the left-hand side. Do you want to, last but not least, add what you're...
I haven't finished yet.
Line of reasoning, yeah, but just since we're running out of time elsewise, just as far as you got.
Yeah, my thing was to say we take like these cards with QR codes will have like hidden content which you don't know and which changes your strategy in any each way. So maybe you have like content you have to include in your sustainable strategy, even if it fits or not, and then you have to deal with it in any way. So in one way, it's some supporting content you can use beneficially, or either it's a bad content you need to get out of the way somehow, just to give it a bit more breaks during the flow. That was my idea.
Yeah. Okay, here we have, and then the devil's advocate that was not part of this idea yet, right?
No, he was already there. I don't know who drew it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we have that as well here. Oh no, whoops. All right, great. Yeah, then we have like two orange ones here on the right-hand side. There are stations and the participants travel to each station. Yeah, okay, make it a spatial journey, so to say. And leave reactions posted by video and text and other candidates to add to initial artifacts when stations are switched. Yeah, okay, another way of making this yeah, journey through the different dilemmas very tangible and giving a spatial dimension to it, so to say. Yeah, thanks very much. I think what we try to demonstrate here is that using the same kind of patterns can still lead to inspires obviously already quite different interpretations of these, like Alexander said, right? So you can use the same patterns a million times over to do the same thing twice. On the right-hand side, you can see the way we were developing the patterns alongside the project, but the way like this corporate sustainability game was developed, it started with just very plain, very simple, choosing predefined dilemmas. Sourcing the dilemmas from the organization obviously is the tricky part in that, and making like identifying meaningful and relevant dilemmas for the participants. Then
Actually,
picking.
We have that on another slide. This is here more for this particular exercise, some ideas, not the corporate sustainability innovation game, but we can share that as well. Going back to the slides.
Yeah. So, then having roles where participants pick different stakeholder cards, give feedback to the others from different perspectives, and then go into a pitch in the end. So that could be another option. But as you see, I mean, of course, you're professionals, and if you're teaching that with the students and doing that with the students, it might take a bit more time, but of course you can do a lot of reflection how that works, what's the advantage, the disadvantage of the different flows we're coming up with. How does the whole setting change if we take out one of the component cards, for instance? Yeah, don't do the roles, but introduce the epic meaning, yeah, some kind of hero's journey instead. Yeah, and how far does the whole flow change in that regard? So I think it's a very helpful, useful tool also to facilitate reflection and comparative evaluation of different gamification designs for given innovation challenges, and to come up with a broad range of design options before you narrow down on one and really go into designing and spelling out how a particular game should work. You can reason about the different flows, the different components, which ones are more or less suitable, and how each of these components and potential flow patterns should be interpreted. Okay, I think I see some hearts blowing up here. That's nice, thanks. But maybe we briefly go back to the slides for now. I mean, you can still have a look and get a copy here of the mural board if you're interested in that. You can also paste your email address into the chat. So once we're still refining the set of the 36 patterns, and we just gave you a preliminary prototype here for now. But as soon as it's possible, we will also make that publicly available here on the Gamify side. We'll create a card deck that you can also work physically or virtually with on a mural board that should be available pretty soon. And you can also have a look at this, what we call the corporate sustainability game. Actually, that's I also pasted the link here into the chat. So all the games from Gamify are publicly available for you to use and download as far as possible. And here you can see a quick overview of the corporate sustainability games and as you see, this working with the dilemmas is one component part of this whole game flow, which then would take about half a day to run through the whole game. Which then brings us to the next slide, and some of the issues I already mentioned. So thinking about these design patterns again, here on the right-hand side, you can see how we reconstructed. After we had developed it, we reconstructed the different games from the Gamify project with using these patterns. And the first good news was that it was pretty straightforward to actually compose all the different games that have not been developed using these patterns, but we could easily reconstruct them using the patterns and saying, okay, so these patterns were used and this is how they were interpreted. And doing that, actually nothing substantial seems to be missing there. We do not want to argue that this selection of 36 patterns so far is absolutely conclusive. So probably there are more patterns to identify. These are the ones that we came up with that are particularly relevant for gamifying innovation and entrepreneurial challenges. And yeah, like I said, You can use them to facilitate the design, to reconstruct existing games, to experiment with different flows and components, to address innovation challenges, or to facilitate a comparison and evaluation of different approaches, especially if you're working with the students. All right, so that's allows us to some time for final discussion, some feedback. I see some very nice feedback here already in the chat. Can we play more games? Yes, you can, but only after the conference, since we're also busy here in these days again, like every year, and we have to integrate all our daily practices and other activities also now into the conference activities, which makes it a particularly challenging format, this online conferencing. Yeah, I don't know, any other ideas, any questions that we can or should discuss?
I wanted to maybe share something. There's an interesting, maybe something that could be worthwhile including is the why of play. As a there's some really interesting philosophy of play. Not so much with regards to the mechanical, but this sort of
maybe you can go back to the canvas, Kira.
So sort of I mean the purpose of play, and I was just going to suggest it. I think it's called Games and Man. There's an interesting book. This is a bit more meta, not so much about the specific mechanics of a game used for teaching, but just in terms of play in general as a human activity. Could be really interesting as a way to frame the benefits of gamification. Sort of at the level of the broader piece of work that you're putting together. I think that could be really beneficial because to get, I guess, one of the most challenging things when trying to play with people who are in work mode is that work mode doesn't necessarily allow for the suspension of disbelief that games really benefit from.
Yeah.
So potentially having something that might help people who are using this tool to focus on that part of the suspension of disbelief and how to get people on a swing and intrinsically motivated to participate could be really addition to what you are providing to frame it, maybe.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a lot of literature out there on this. Here from Huizinga, the very old works on the Homo ludens, and the ones you already added here, Carlois, Men, Play, and Games. Right. So
I read it in Spanish, so I don't know the title in English.
Yeah.
I had a question. I think that liberating structures have become a popular source for kind of workshops or kind of to bring people out of their normal set. And I think that this is great because it's almost like you can make your own if you use the patterns. So it's even more flexible and maybe could bring in more creativity than just by using a fully set up workshop. So thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really a nice and really flexible tool also like for student classes, right? For professional development, or also I think for just game designers who just want to play around with like all the different design options they have, because the first solution or the first ideas that come to mind might not always be the best one, even if you're quite experienced in that. And I think this, this kind of approach can help you to explore like the breadth and the different range of options that you have and to compare different approaches to that. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. We very much appreciate your feedback. Thanks for joining the session. Thanks also here to the partners here from the GAMIFY consortium, Sune, our super expert on gamification and games from Design School Kolding, Sandra Dyke from HHL. I see you're in the room. Carmen Abril is not here today, but also contributed heavily to this. And so thanks to all of you, and thanks to the participants, and thanks for joining here even towards the end of the conference. Here you can see our acknowledgements with also Lisa Weber, Karina Loye, Sina Pleach, Kyla Perez, and the others that are heavily engaged in this whole Gamify project. So thanks very much, and check out the Gamify site if you're interested in the other games as well and some of the other deliverables we have there. And feel free to contact us and to overwhelm myself and Sandra, who's project coordinator here for us, with your emails. We'll respond to all of them. Thank you very much.